most commonly told origin story for the Christmas tree in Britain, hello Freya, is that Prince Albert brought the tradition over from Germany when he married Queen Victoria, and that's what made it popular. This is partly true, not really entirely true. It's also clearly not the whole truth, because why was it so popular in Germany and how did it spread to places like the United States that didn't have Prince Albert? Hi, I'm Juliet. I'm a writer and historian, and on this channel I explore myth, legend, folklore, ghost stories, and weird and wonderful history in general. And today I am looking at the origins of the Christmas tree. In his book, published in 1876, Thomas Thistleton Dyer said, "Various suggestions have been made as to the origin of the Christmas tree. Mr. Timms suggests it being traceable to the ancient Egyptians and their palm tree, which produces a branch every month and was held to be emblematical of the year. The Germans may be said to claim it as peculiar to themselves, as being indicative of their attachment to Christianity. They identify it with the apostolic labours of St. Maternus, one of the earliest, if not the very first, of the preachers of the gospel among them. They have a legend of his sleeping under a fir tree and of a miracle that occurred on that occasion. Mr. McCabe, however, thinks that the Christmas tree is traceable to the Roman Saturnalia and was not improbably first imported into Germany with the conquering legions of Drusus. The Christmas tree, such as we now see it, with its pendant toys and mannequins, is distinctly portrayed in a single line of Virgil from the Georgics. Oscilla ex alta suspendunt mollia pinu. Little masks suspended from tall pine trees. Thistleton Dyer thinks that the image of these masks found on an ancient gem in Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Antiquities looks just like a Christmas tree. Here it is. It's clearly not a pine or fir tree for starters, although the masks do look a bit like some Christmas decorations I saw at the weekend. Little round pieces of wood used as decorations for Christmas trees at a National Trust property, the Kinveredge Rock Houses, where all of the trees have been decorated for their Father Christmas visits for the kids. And they look not unlike the little masks of Bacchus shown in the gem and described in the ancient sources, although less creepy, because little masks of Bacchus sounds kind of simultaneously cute and creepy to me. Thistleton Dyer continues, within the last 20 years, and apparently since the marriage of Queen Victoria with Prince Albert, previous to which time it was almost unknown in this country, the Christmas tree has been introduced into England with the greatest success. Now, he's not quite accurate there, but it's sort of true. Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Antiquities, which is Thistleton Dyer's source for some of the stuff about the masks of Bacchus, adds oscillum, which is the word for those little masks. A diminutive through osculum from os, meaning a little face, was the term applied to faces or heads of Bacchus which were suspended in the vineyards to be turned in every direction by the wind. The left-hand figure is an annexed woodcut taken from an osculum of white marble in the British Museum, represents Bacchus's face, with, Smith adds, a beautiful, mild and propitious expression. And there is a metallic ring by which the marble was suspended, so that ring at the top, like a Christmas decoration, allows you to hang it from a tree. The other figure is from an ancient gem, that's all the information Smith gives, representing a tree with 4 oscilla hung upon its branches. A syrinx and a pedum are placed at the root of the tree. So the syrinx is that musical instrument that looks like panpipes, and then the pedum is that thing that looks like a shepherd's crook. There is a slight problem with this theory, which is that that line from Virgil's Georgics and the use of the oscillum doesn't actually refer to the Saturnalia. It's a different festival. The Saturnalia is in honour of the god Saturn, and these are in honour of Bacchus. Virgil is describing an ancient Greek festival from pre the Roman period called Ascolia, part of the rural Dionysia in the month of Poseidon, which is roughly December to January, during which these little masks of Dionysus, or to the Romans, Bacchus, would be hung from the vines to turn in the wind. It was a December-January festival, so the idea that this might be part of the root of the idea of the Christmas tree isn't totally out of the realm of possibility. It's just not Saturnalia. Saturnalia is a Roman festival where we do get some Christmas traditions from, and I'm going to talk about it in much more detail in next week's video. It is worth mentioning that at the Saturnalia, houses would be decorated with greenery and with lights. There probably is a connection between Saturnalia celebrations and the eventual development of the tradition of the Christmas tree, but that's not the festival that Virgil's line about little masks of Bacchus is referring to. I'm not really going to address Mr. Timms' suggestion about Egyptian palm trees, because I'm not entirely convinced by that one at all. I mean, not that palm trees aren't important to the ancient Egyptians, but I don't think they really have anything to do with the development of the Christmas tree. Another suggestion he mentioned was a saint he called Saint Maternus. Now, there are two Saint Maternuses, Saint Maternus of Milan and Saint Maternus of Cologne. I have not been able to find a connection with either of them and any kind of legend about sleeping under a fir tree. Saint Maternus of Cologne does fit the description of a missionary who went out to Germania, Germany. He was a 4th century bishop. I can't find anything relating to trees from either of them. If anybody knows of a legend about any saint sleeping under a fir tree, or especially either Saint Maternus being associated with a tree, then please let me know, because I've not managed to find anything. I did find some stuff on St. Boniface, and I wonder if Thistleton Dyer's source had mixed up Maternus and Boniface, because St. Boniface is also a saint well known for missionary activity in Germania, or Germany. He was much later than the German St. Maternus of Cologne. He was an English missionary from Wessex who was responsible for persuading a lot of Germania, Germany, to convert to Christianity. According to the 8th century Life of St. Boniface, with help from a heavenly bolt of lightning, he cut down an oak tree at Geismar that was sacred to Jupiter. Now, for Jupiter, we should read Thor. This is a common practice in ancient sources of assuming that everybody is worshipping the same gods with different names. In the case of the Greeks and Romans, they actually are. In the case of other religions, they are quite different gods with quite different stories and religion and mythology and everything, but quite a lot of the sources will just assume that everybody's gods are the same gods. So we should assume that this is Thor, not Jupiter. So that's the story of St. Boniface. In 1891, a short story called The Oak of Geismar by Henry van Dyke was published in Scribner's magazine. And in this story, a child is about to be sacrificed at this oak sacred to Thor, and it does say Thor this time, when Boniface intervenes and a lightning strike hits the oak. It leaves an untouched young fir tree behind it. Boniface tells them to take home this fir tree and put lights on it, so they're kind of sacrificing the fir tree instead of the child. And he calls it the tree of the Christ child, so the Christmas tree, as a sign of peace and the end of the human sacrifice. So this story is 1891, and clearly Christmas trees have already become popular throughout many parts of Europe and America by now. This has often been suggested as the source of the legend about St. Boniface being the inventor or originator of the Christmas tree, which gets repeated online quite a lot. There's quite a few websites that will just say, there's a legend about St. Boniface cutting down this oak tree and there's a young fir tree and it's substituted for a child's human sacrifice, etc., etc. Now, it is worth noting that this short story from 1891 is later than Thistleton Dyer's book about British popular customs. So this is not the originator of the idea that the Christmas tree was invented by a missionary to Germany in the early medieval period or late antique period. Thistleton Dyer says it's St. Maternus, and as I say, I've not been able to track down any version of any story about St. Maternus that would fit, but that's what he says. But there's clearly an idea out there that a missionary to Germany came up with the idea of the Christmas tree. That doesn't mean it's true necessarily, but it does predate that short story about St. Boniface, although that short story might be the one that cemented the idea. Christmas trees had become especially popular in Germany from the late medieval and early modern period, and there are customs in other parts of Europe, including Britain, that predate the Christmas tree and that lead to its development as well. One 16th century historian claimed that in previous centuries, so later medieval period, every parish had a great pole serving as a maypole in the summer, so that's the British tradition of dancing around the maypole, and it was decorated with holly and ivy in the winter, so that would make it look like a Christmas tree. It's not a fir tree, obviously, but it would make it look similar to a Christmas tree. And this historian says in 1444, a storm in London had blown down a standard of tree nailed full of holly and ivy for Christmas. This is reported by Judith Flanders in her book Christmas: A History, and frustratingly, she doesn't say which historian it was. She also reports the St. Boniface legend. But still interesting, and if anybody knows which historian it was that reported that, please tell me in the comments. Some people credit Martin Luther with popularising the idea in Germany, with kind of inventing the modern Christmas tree, along with his 95 Theses and accidentally creating Protestantism. I say accidentally because he never meant to leave the Catholic Church, he wanted to reform it, not leave it. Anyway, particularly Luther is credited with the idea of putting lighted candles in the tree. Judith Flanders thinks this is unlikely because there is a record of lighted candles in a tree from Strasbourg from 1605, which is obviously later than Martin Luther, who lives in the 1500s, early 1500s, and indoor trees are not mentioned in Luther's hometown of Wittenberg until the 18th century. However, the earliest records of Christmas trees in Germany are from the Rhineland in the 1520s, so Martin Luther may or may not have had anything to do with it. Hard to say, but certainly by the 1500s and certainly into the 1600s, we are seeing the tradition of a Christmas tree being brought indoors and lighted candles put into it taking root in parts of Germany. The idea of evergreens being associated with Christmas also goes beyond, of course, just the Christmas tree. We've already mentioned the holly and the ivy, and of course mistletoe has a large place in Christmas traditions. Mistletoe in the British Isles, in Gaul, what is now France, and the Celtic parts of Europe has a very long history. The Roman natural historian Pliny the Elder said that the Druids held nothing more sacred than the mistletoe and the tree that bears it. Mistletoe is, of course, a parasitical life form, and it attaches itself to other trees. Pliny says of the Druids, "The mistletoe, when found, is gathered with rites replete with religious awe. This is done on the 5th day of the moon, the day which is the beginning of their months and years. Having made all due preparation for the sacrifice and a banquet beneath the trees, they bring thither 2 white bulls. Clad in a white robe, the priest ascends the tree and cuts the mistletoe with a golden sickle, which is received by others in a white cloak. Then they burn the victims, offering up their prayers that God will render this gift of his propitious to those to whom he has so granted it. It is the belief with them that the mistletoe taken in drink will make animals fertile that are barren, and that it is an antidote for all poisons." So that obviously doesn't relate specifically to Christmas or a winter festival, it's something done all year round, but it indicates the importance of mistletoe in pre-Christian traditions in the Celtic parts of Europe. Holly and ivy are much more closely connected with Christmas, specifically throughout the medieval and early modern periods. Since at least the later medieval period, it has been a tradition to decorate the church with holly and ivy for Christmas. Some Londoners were arrested for doing so when Oliver Cromwell's Puritan government banned the celebration of Christmas during the 1600s. Sometimes holly was placed inside and ivy in the porch, with the holly representing the male and the ivy the female. Like the greenery at Saturnalia, the idea is to bring warmth and light and colour into the home at the darkest and most kind of empty, greenery-wise, time of year. And holly and ivy with candles in them were also used to decorate people's homes. So that's another precursor of the Christmas tree. It's evergreen greenery with candles in it. It's just in the form of branches of holly and ivy rather than the tree. Greenery was often used to decorate people's homes at other festivals and celebrations throughout the year as well, so it's not specific to Christmas, but it's particularly noticeable at Christmas because there's very little greenery outside. You have to use the small number of evergreen branches and trees and bushes available to you, and it makes a big contrast with the bare trees that you are seeing outside at this time of year, particularly in European climates. There are plenty of evergreen plants, but there's also an awful lot that aren't evergreen, so the tree branches are looking pretty bare by this time of year. So it's particularly noticeable when you bring in evergreens at Christmas, although it happened at all sorts of festivals throughout the year. By the early 16th century, mistletoe is being talked about specifically in connection with Christmas. By the late 18th century, people have started using a bough of an evergreen, and mistletoe is the most popular, though it could be any evergreen at that point, as a kissing bush. Which is the tradition that's still around of kissing under the mistletoe, but it used to be any evergreen. Mistletoe was just the most popular choice. And of course we have Christmas carols about holly and ivy and their symbolism and connection to Christmas. Deck the halls with boughs of holly originated in Wales in the 16th century, and The Holly and the Ivy was published in broadsides in Birmingham in the early 19th century. The Christmas tree as we know it spread to Britain and the USA via German settlers from at least 1789-ish onwards. They were popular in the USA, the Netherlands, and several Scandinavian countries from the late 18th century. Literally, migration from Germany out to those places brought the Christmas tree with them. Kind of reminds me of the old Disney Swiss Family Robinson movie where they have a Christmas tree on their desert island. Oops. They had already become pretty popular across Norway, Finland, the USA, the Netherlands by the early 19th century. In Britain, in the late 18th century, Queen Charlotte, who was German, as was her grandfather-in-law, King George I. George III was born and raised in England, but George I was German and barely even spoke English. So the royal family's German anyway. But then George III marries Queen Charlotte, who is also German, and she had a yew tree as a Christmas tree in the royal palace. By the 1820s, people in Manchester had started to adopt Christmas trees from the German community living in Manchester. Queen Victoria, again from a German family, already had a Christmas tree in 1832. On Christmas Eve in 1840, a doctor called H.W. Ackland saw one in Roehampton in Surrey and thought it was relatively unusual, but it's clearly starting to spread quite a bit by then. And it was in 1841 that Prince Albert set one up at Windsor Castle. Although possibly even more significant, in 1848, the Illustrated London News ran a woodcut of the royal family celebrating Christmas, showing them around their Christmas tree. So that's really when it absolutely takes off, but it has been slowly spreading throughout Britain before that point. By 1850, Charles Dickens, well-known lover of Christmas, is still calling it a pretty German toy, but it's definitely spreading and becoming more and more popular. And by the time Thistleton Dyer is writing in 1875, 1876, it's obviously well established and people are already starting to debate its origins. Some people still stuck to decorating their homes with holly and ivy or with the kissing bough, which eventually becomes specifically mistletoe. Christmas trees became really completely ubiquitous in the UK in the 1950s, but they are popular from the 1850s onwards, 1840s onwards. There's also a financial element, of course. Nowadays you can get a reasonably priced plastic one. But getting hold of a tree and bringing it into your home, how easy and financially viable that is going to depend on where you live and all sorts of other factors. So a few branches of holly and ivy and mistletoe is probably a bit cheaper and easier in many cases. Christmas trees used to be put up on Christmas Eve at the end of the season of Advent. Advent in the Christian religious calendar, so Roman Catholic Church of England and the various more formalised denominations, Advent is a season of preparation. Christmas is from Christmas Day through to Twelfth Night. 5th of January, and then Feast of Epiphany on the 6th of January. And that's the Christmas season. Advent is meant to be more like Lent before Easter, a time of fasting and preparation. So the celebrations would actually begin on Christmas Eve. However, we put ours up on the 1st of December because I like Christmas trees. Outdoor Christmas trees were popularised particularly by the Rockefeller Center tree, although of course they had a long tradition. Many of the examples I've talked about already were outdoors, like the maypole decorated with holly and ivy and stuff like that. But specifically the modern outdoor Christmas tree is particularly popularised in 1931 when Italian-American construction workers building the Rockefeller Center donated a Christmas tree. And that was the origin of the now famous Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. The Trafalgar Square Christmas tree in London has been being put up around the beginning of December since 1947. It's an annual gift to the people of Britain and London from the people of Norway as a thank you for British support for Norway during World War II. And it's a really lovely tradition that's still going to this day. I hope you've enjoyed this brief potted history of the Christmas tree. If, like many people, you enjoy a ghost story at Christmas, consider picking up Creepy Classics, Ghost Stories from Ancient Rome. This is my collection of ancient Roman ghost stories retold. 13 ancient Roman ghost stories. Each one gives you the original source and provides a modern retelling of the story. Some author's notes at the back if you're interested in the history. And it's available in paperback or ebook from Amazon, and it's free to read with Kindle Unlimited. Next week I'll be back with a video on the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which is often credited with being the source of many of our Christmas traditions. And in the meantime, I hope you're enjoying the holiday season. Here is my little mini Christmas tree for the study. I got the 3-year-old to help me decorate this one. This was my Christmas tree when I first lived alone before I had a proper one. And here we can see the angel on top of the Christmas tree is a homemade, if you can see his little tie and his little hair, this is Castiel from Supernatural. And as you can see, I made this myself. He's my angel on top of the Christmas tree for the one in the study. And then we have the tinsel, which my husband absolutely refuses to have on the main Christmas tree in the living room, but I love tinsel, so there it is. And my favourite little bird decoration, it's very similar to one my parents have. This is mine, but it broke. So the bird sits at the bottom of the Christmas tree in the study.